Hello and welcome to our Passion for Moms webinar series, Mothers Are Leaders. And it is so great to be back with you today. I'm excited to have our guest, Laurie Solhjem, with us today. And we have a lot to talk about and a lot in store for this afternoon, and talking about infertility. I know that's a hard topic and a sensitive topic, but it's one that we want to be able to just hear Laurie's story of what she walked through, and hopefully that is an encouragement to those who are listening today. So Laurie Solhjem, welcome. I'm so glad to have you.
Glad to be here.
Laurie, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are so that our guests can get to know you, and then we'll go from there. So Laurie, tell us a little bit about your background, how many children you have, anything you want to share with us.
Okay, my name is Laurie. I have 3 girls. Their ages 10, 8, and 6, and we live in Northern Virginia. Before having kids, I worked in church, I worked in retail, I worked in restaurants, I worked in daycare, private school, and then my husband was in the Air Force, and between the two of us, we had probably worked every job and probably done every piece of ministry in church possible. So that has led me up to here and now.
Well, it sounds like that you are well-versed, a wealth of resource and knowledge and information. I know Laurie's helped us on our Passion for Moms team, and she is definitely somebody who can do it all. So all of your experiences have definitely served you well. So yeah.
No specific specialty, just random everything.
Hey, jack of all trades is a good person to have, right?
Yeah.
Well, tell us, so you said you have 3 girls. Tell us what that has looked like in this season. Just, we've embarked on a completely new season since March worldwide, and what that's looked like with schooling and being home, and now summertime. So has this season been challenging or hard? Has it been maybe brought out some fruit or new things that you weren't expecting? What does that look like for you and your family?
Well, we are in a very fortunate situation where I already stay home full time. I was already doing that, and my husband works full time, and he did not think he'd be able to work from home, but actually was able to, and up until this week has been working from home. 3 girls in elementary school, and everybody was homeschool, and it was hard. It took a learning curve, but overall, I would say it's been really great. And I almost feel guilty saying that because I know it's been so hard for so many people. I mean, even people in my own family, it's been hard for, and people we are close to, it's been hard for. But for us, we've just enjoyed being together. And it's funny because now it's been so long that it's like, all of the phases of quarantine, like, hey, remember we were wearing coats when this started? Like, and now it's summer and we're still at home. And, like we had the tent in the living room for like, I don't know, 3 weeks, and thought, oh, by the time this is over, we'll have that put away. But it lived there for quite a while. And then we entered a Barbie phase. Now we have a, what do you call it? It's like a big treehouse coloring box. It's like in the shape of a treehouse. So that's our summer project right now, is coloring this treehouse. And as soon as it's done, then they can all sleep in it. And that's what they're waiting for.
Well, that's so fun.
Yeah. So it's actually been fun. I mean, the not fun part about it for me has been all of the cooking, because I don't like cooking. And there's like so many dishes. You're like, 3 meals a day. Go find your own food. It's free for all again. Okay, I'm not cooking for you people again. Like, it's too much food. And I'm like, oh my gosh, could we spend any more money on groceries? That's been like insane. But overall, like puzzles, games, movies, we like have introduced the kids to Urkel and Family Matters, like Boy Meets World, Girl Meets World. Like, we've gone through all these series. They now know what binge means, truly. So it's been fun in that way. And we also on a more serious note, have been able to implement like really good rhythms and patterns for our family. And, when you're rushing out the door, you don't necessarily have time to sit and read scripture together. But when there's nowhere to go, it's like, well, let's just sit and read this. So we have gone through a few books of the Bible, and we finished Esther right at the beginning of summer. And we were like, what should we read next? And they were like, Job. And I was like, why? Well, it's the next book, Mommy. I'm like, okay, so we're reading Job over quarantine summer, so keeping it really light at our house this summer.
Well, I guess if you're reading Job, then you constantly are being reminded to be grateful.
Yeah.
Right?
You're like, how much more? I'm like, like 30 more chapters.
Well, that's probably more people could and should join you with the book of Job and just being reminded.
Well, they've only ever heard, Sunday school version of Job of like, it was bad and then it was good. And I'm like, it was like years, right? Like, it wasn't like boom, boom. Like, it was years, right? Oh. So, yeah, we have a long ways to go. We're not done with that book yet, but we will be by the end of summer, and we will be very grateful for quarantine.
Well, and it's a good reminder just to recognize that, we all have challenges and we all have suffering, and our suffering comes in many different ways and manifests itself in different ways, and how God allows us to walk through suffering. My suffering isn't going to look like your suffering, but just like with Job, that God's faithful, right? And so just recognizing, it sounds like there's a lot of really great principles that you can teach your girls as you walk through a practical season of life not looking normal as well. So, I commend you. I think it sounds pretty amazing. So good job.
Yeah.
Well, has there been, speaking of things that you're spending time in the Word, has there been a particular maybe lesson or learning opportunity that you've seen God show up in this season of just how you've had to kind of pivot and adjust, how you do life, and then having to homeschool when, you were used to your kids being gone all day during the day. And so has there been a particular maybe way that you've seen God fresh and new during this season?
Oh, for sure. Like the other part of like reading with them every day is we would also pray together every day and say, in every prayer we start with, thank you. Like, thank you that we are together, that we are healthy, that we have provisions, that we have shelter, that we have food, that, there's not a need that we have that God hasn't fulfilled already. And so just a season of gratefulness to say, it doesn't look like this for everybody else. Like, this is what it looks like in suburban, Northern Virginia in our household, but this isn't the case for a lot of people, like unemployment is a real thing, and luckily our daddy can work from home and we haven't, missed a bill, but that's not the case for a lot of people. So bringing that truth to them to say, no, we have a lot to be grateful for, a lot. And that, we were planning to go to Florida to see my parents, and we had to cancel that trip. And so it would be easy to say, oh, we don't get a summer vacation. And I've been seeing a lot of beach pictures on Instagram. And even for myself, it would be really easy to say, oh gosh, good for them, but the truth is, like, we made a summer bucket list, which we always do, but I put it with, like, instead of normal just list, I columned it between what's possible and what's a wish, like what's actually possible. So, and most of it we've already done. Have a picnic, go on a hike, go, do whatever, climb a tree, or, I made it really basic, and they're like, oh, wow, look how much we can do this summer instead of what we can't do, because there's a lot we can do. And, moreover, we're together and we're healthy, so that has been like an overarching of like this whole season of being grateful and keeping our eyes wide open to everything around us,
Well, isn't that so interesting how when we kind of shift and adjust our mentality of looking for what we can do instead of focusing on what we can't do, it does a couple of things. It opens up our eyes to opportunities that maybe we take for granted, or we maybe wouldn't naturally explore, like going on a hike. Our family's been doing weekly hikes, and that's something that we hadn't been doing before. So it opens your eyes to new opportunities, but it also shifts your mindset to be able to focus on just the gratitude and thankfulness of all that you can do, instead of kind of having that bitter mindset of being sullen and sulky of things that feel like that we're missing out on. So I think it really helps us shift our mindset, across the board. So I think
my husband, he commutes to Bethesda every day. So that was an over an hour drive every day each way. And oh, wow, look how much more we get daddy. He's home. He's not commuting. Like, that's awesome. Like, it actually was really good. It actually was really good for us. 2 of my kids couldn't ride a bike without training wheels when this started. And now we go on family bike rides, and we never could do that before. So like, this is the summer of bike rides for us. So like, we never could do that before, and so now we're like riding our bikes to every playground in the neighborhood.
That's awesome. That's so fun.
And so now when they think back to this time, they're not thinking, oh, I couldn't go to school, or I couldn't see my friends. They're like, I learned how to ride a bike, like it's shifted that for them too, of like making a good memory of it.
That's so good. And Laurie, that's such a great reminder for all of us as moms to help our children, channel their focus on, what they are able to do, and help them look back on this as, a sweet season. I really think that in many ways that our children will look back on seeing this as a very sweet time. Yes, definitely a lot of hardships and a lot of sadness and loss, but a sweet season for families. So that's amazing. Laurie, I know you're very intentional with your children and parenting. What would you say is one nugget that you really want your girls, when they leave home, to have at their core of who they are?
I think is to know that my God is their God. That the God that I pray to and that I think on and I worship to is their God. That it can be my God, and it can also be their God, and to know that for themselves and not through me. And we had a conversation this morning, even after our Job reading, I want you girls to have your own relationship with God. My kids are still a little bit young, so they haven't all asked Jesus into their heart yet. But even this morning, I just told them, I hope you do. I hope you do ask Jesus into your heart. And, we have 30 minutes of quiet time every day where we all just take a break from each other. And that's another crucial part of quarantine and we do that every summer anyways. Like, those are things that we already do anyway. So it wasn't a shock for them to be like, oh, let's just go have 30 minutes to ourselves, of just give everybody a break. And I'm like, I'm not going to tell you have to read the Bible for 30 minutes or you have to pray for 30 minutes, but I'm telling you, you have 30 minutes of quiet alone time that's how I would like to see you utilize that time, and that's how I utilize that time is I take that 30 minutes for myself and read and refill, so that when they come back out of their rooms during that time, then I feel refreshed. And, sometimes that's early in the morning for people, but I'm not getting up early. So I just do it during that time.
Well, and I think that you bring up some really valuable points for all of us as moms who are listening, is recognizing that, we want to instill scripture in our children. We want to teach our children about Jesus. We want them to know Jesus, but it is so important that when they launch and leave home, that they own that for themselves. That it's not just, this is the way we were brought up, we went to church, or, but that they really own their relationship with Jesus personally. So I think that's an amazing goal. And I know as we set goals as parents, that's something that we're very intentional then in fostering, of how we talk and relate. And so I think that's really incredible and a great reminder for all of us who are listening, that we want our children to have ownership of their relationship with Jesus, each individually.
And this is another great lesson during this time to say, my faith isn't dependent on me going to church every Sunday, clearly, right. Because we haven't been to church in months, but my faith is as strong, if not stronger, as it was 3 months ago, because I spend time, and I explain it to them in the simplest of ways of saying, when me and Daddy, before we got married, we spent time together every day to know each other. And that's what you have to do with God, so that you know him for yourself. And it's not dependent on one day a week. It's every day, and we can all do that at home.
Well, that's a great point also, of just recognizing that, our relationship with Jesus shouldn't be a religion, traditions of going to church or, things like that. But those are great things. Mm-hmm. But our relationship with Jesus is personal, and it's daily, and it's spending time with him daily. So it's not about if the church doors are open. It's about, I get to spend time with Jesus every single day. And what a privilege that is.
Yeah.
The other thing you mentioned that I think is really enlightening, and I think very wise, is you having your 30-minute window of you call it taking a break from one another. And when my kids were little, we had room time, but I like how you I don't know if, you do this with your husband, but even just recognizing that you have different personalities, you have different, the introvert and extrovert, you have different people who need to just have a break, and maybe you need a break in the morning and in the afternoon in some families. But I think that's really valuable to recognize the importance of, when you are in a season of being together 24/7, whether it's, with COVID or it's with, just summertime, recognizing the value of that. It is so crucial to kind of, all go to your corners, if you will, to kind of come back refreshed and renewed. And so I think that that's a really practical lesson for moms who are listening. That's just a practical, wise word.
Yeah. And the other part of that too is like just being quiet. If we say we want to have a relationship with God, that means talking to him, but it also means listening. And that means having to get quiet sometimes so that you can hear him when he speaks to you. And, this morning we were like, okay, it's not an audible voice, but he can give you ideas and thoughts and put things in your heart and point you to a scripture. And that's how the Holy Spirit speaks to you in those different ways. And I want you to recognize that voice for yourself. And the only way you're going to do that is by practicing it,
Right. Yeah. The virtue of learning how to be still and being quiet. And in our society, I think in a lot of ways, this COVID season has been so valuable for that, mm-hmm. forcing us to slow down, forcing us to reevaluate how we spend our time, forcing us to reevaluate what's really important in our lives. And I think a season of quiet is really so good. And I mean, we know that God gave us the Sabbath, but he gave us the Sabbath not out of legalism. He gave us the Sabbath out of, it is for our good. And so learning how to have rhythms of quiet, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, are, God knows that we need them.
Yeah. Right? And I definitely send them out on their bikes before that so that they'll be tired, so that they can sit in there for 30 minutes and not, get overexcited. Wear them out a little bit before you put them in there.
You are full of wisdom. Not only are you wise about having moments of quiet built in the day, you're wise about how you navigate the moments of quiet. Very wise.
Thanks.
Well, Laurie, so one of the things that I want us to talk about today is, I know that all three of your daughters are the apple of your eye, the pride and joy of just being able to enjoy them as a mother. But you've been very open about that it was a long journey to get to that place of having 3 daughters. So can you just tell us, you mentioned that you struggled with infertility for 7 years, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, mm-hmm. but that was a long journey of waiting, mm-hmm. of wanting children, mm-hmm. And God not answering that prayer for 7 years. And what did that season look like? Tell us what's your story? Tell us what that looked like for you.
Yeah. So people who know me now probably don't know this about me, or if they do, they maybe know a little bit, but not like the whole 7-year long part of it. Like if you see me now, you think, oh wow, she had 3 girls, yay! Like, oh, you're like happy, you know. But you know, there was a journey before any of that happened. And you know, me and my husband were married really young. I was 20 and he was 22. And well, and the other thing I will say is, like, this is my story. There are many infertility stories. This is my story. My story did not include IVF. My story did not include shots and, you know, crazy medical expensive things, because we was too broke for that. And my journey does not include adoption. My journey for me was waiting. And whenever something happens or there's a phase or a period in your life, for me, I always think, what am I supposed to learn from this? What is my takeaway from this? And even as we entered COVID, it was like, oh wow, school's canceled. What is God trying to teach me? Like, why is he locking us all in our houses? Like, what am I supposed to walk away with this from? And so that's what infertility was for me, of like, what's going on here? And what am I missing that I'm supposed to be learning from this? So I'll start with saying that, like, this is my own personal story, and there's a lot of different stories in infertility. But for us, we were married very young. Even before we were married, I grew up with a stay-at-home mom. He grew up with a primarily stay-at-home mom. And we had decided right from the get-go that I would stay home. And that's just what was important to our family. Like, we don't want other people raising our kids. I want to be the primary caregiver to them. I want to be, you know, their first sight line to the world and God and everything else, you know. So when you don't get pregnant, you think, for me, it was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna be a stay-home mom, but I don't have any kids. How can I stay home with kids but I can't get any kids? So it wasn't even just like, oh, it's gonna be a part of my life. We anticipated it being our whole life. So I mean, like, when you prepare, then go to college and you're expecting to get a job and then you don't get it, you know, like, even if you don't know or can't understand the story of infertility, everybody can identify with the idea of expecting something and it not happening. Right. And then the fear of it never happening. Like, that's so relatable to everybody, whether it's a job or a house or, you know, a spouse or whatever. Like, everybody can identify with, this is what I thought was going to happen, and it just didn't happen. And especially having a baby, you know, in health class, they never tell you, like, it's not going to work. Like, you expect it's like a natural process. You expect it to happen. You don't expect to, wait, what's something wrong with me? Like, no, like, it's just not happening. And so the journey started with, okay, well, let's just wait and see. Like, we'll just see what happens. And then, like, nothing. And then you wait another year and you're like, okay, still nothing, you know? And then it's like, well, let's just go to the doctor and see. And like, oh, I'm all good. And he's all good. Still not happening. Like, still not happening. And then to be considered infertile, you have to have been trying and with no success for a year, right? So if you've been trying for a year, like, they won't even label you infertile until it's been a year. And so that was the first step of, okay, well, it's been a year since I've been to the doctor. Now I know I'm infertile. Well, then not long after that, I actually did get pregnant and had a miscarriage. And it actually wasn't even technically a miscarriage. I had what was called a blighted ovum, where a sac forms, but then there's no baby inside. And we were living in Maryland at the time, and I had to go to Johns Hopkins, which is like this amazing hospital, right? And that was not my experience. First of all, you have to pay for parking there. Why? At a hospital. So that was terrible. And then I had to go into the hospital and have a super pregnant female doctor do an ultrasound and tell me that there's no heartbeat on my baby. And then I had to just wait to lose what was inside me, and I couldn't. And so then I ended up having to have a D&C. And that probably was the lowest of the lows for me. I never consider myself depressed during any of this time, because I tried to, like, keep a good, you know, view. But that was the lowest of, like, what is God doing? Like, why would he do this? And it all happened like right during Mother's Day. I had told everybody had already been praying for us at church, and we were so excited. And then no. And it's really humbling to tell people, no, there's not a baby,
Right.
That's really hard. So then the doctor's like, well, that's good. You can get pregnant now. So now let's wait another year. And because you have to be infertile for a whole year. And during that time, I could feel in myself just gross of like bitterness, jealousy, borderline idolatry of like, oh wow, this is like occupying all of my mind space, like it's looking gross, like it's getting bad. Like people, and when you're young marrieds in church, we had a lot of young marrieds around us, so everybody was getting pregnant. But at the same time, there was a lot of other ladies dealing with infertility also. I mean, so there was some comfort in knowing like, oh wow, like them too, like, and it's not really something that you like publicly talk about, but when you really like get in a small group with some ladies, you're like, oh, you too? Oh, there's like a lot of us. And honestly, I still know women that were waiting during that time with me who still haven't, so it's just really hard when you think something's going to happen and it just doesn't, and you can stop me anytime because I can just go on and on.
Yeah, this is so good. No, keep going. This is
yeah. So then I had a friend who was pregnant, and she had a really hard pregnancy. And before that, she had also had some miscarriages, a couple of them. And so she had a hard pregnancy that required some help. And it just so happened that I was the person that was available to help her all the time.
Wow.
And I was like, really? Me? Like, oh, I don't want to help this pregnant lady. We were friends, but I was like, oh gosh. And so that really forced me to stop thinking about myself. It really forced me to get my eyes off of myself and to care for someone else. It really gave me compassion to other people. And mind you, during this time, me and my husband were both like, okay, well, if we can't have kids, we're just going to do as much ministry stuff as we can while we can. Like expecting someday that we will have kids and we won't be able to do everything at church. But right now we are. So we threw ourselves into everything. Worship, youth, kids, everything. And I also was working at the church, so we pretty much just lived at church all the time. But helping that friend and walking through her pregnancy with her, it really just broke my heart. And it's easy to look at my story and say, oh, the resolve is she got pregnant and that's the answer. That wasn't the answer. The resolve for me was that God healed my heart.
Wow.
He took away all that pain. He took away that bitterness and that jealousy. He took away that consuming, like, I want this and you're not giving it to me, that I had. Like, why would you deny me, God? What I think is my purpose in life. Why are you not giving it to me? But he took all of that away and basically convicted me to say, don't you want me more? Aren't you searching me more than you're asking for this? Trust me. I'm a big God. I can, there's a lot I can do. And so, and also in the midst of this, I will say that I read a statistic that infertility couples are 3 times more likely to get divorced because you're not always on the same page, I'm a type A, like, let's get it done. Like, let's go, So my instinct was to be like, okay, what do we need to do? But my husband's instinct was, no, we just need to wait. And it took a long time to like get on that same page. So there were times where it was like, there was strife, and so God healed that. He healed that in our marriage. He let me not only depend on him, but to rely on my husband's faith also, to say, like, we just need to wait. And I'm not really a wait and see kind of person, that's not really natural for me. So waiting, yeah. And so the resolve for me was that he healed my heart. He took all that yuck inside me, and I could see it inside myself, you know, and I knew I don't want to feel this way. Like I was at least able to see that in myself of like, I don't want this. So yeah, the resolve was like, he healed my heart. He fixed my relationship with my husband. He let me depend on him fully. And I had truly gotten to the place where I could say, if it never happens, I'm good. Mm-hmm. If I never get the answer to this prayer, I'm going to worship God. I'm still going to keep my faith. He is still present. I still have so much that he has done. And so that was the resolve. And then it was probably 3 months after that, of that like clarity, that we learned that I was pregnant.
Wow.
And then 2 more after that. Wow. So it's really easy to say, oh wow, she has kids now, so it's all good. But it wasn't just the having kids that was the answer for my prayer. It was allowing God to do a work in me, you know, and preparing me for motherhood. You know, honestly, like I'm a way better mom now than I would have been 7 years earlier. You know, I was so selfish and immature and young and naive that, I mean, I just feel like, wow, I probably needed those 7 years to be the mom. And that's not to say I'm a perfect mom, but I bring a lot more spiritual maturity to the motherhood table than I would have prior, you know. And this experience has opened up so many conversations with other moms and other women. I mean, this conversation itself, like I wouldn't be talking about this otherwise, but it really, and I also would say like, it's really easy as a young stay-at-home mom to get your identity wrapped up in motherhood. Right. But it pushed me to have my identity focused on him and made by him before motherhood came along.
Right.
So.
Wow, I have so many questions and thoughts. First of all, I think it's interesting going back to the fact that you're reading Job. One of the things that I can, while I cannot identify with infertility, what I can identify is holding your children so close. You know, I had a friend that died as a mom at 33 and left 5 kids under the age of 8. And that really shaped my thinking going into motherhood and being very fearful of death, fearful of my death and fearful of my girl's death. And so here's where I'll say that while I can't identify with the infertility aspect, holding something so close that it becomes an idol. And this is where then with Job, getting to the place where you can honestly say, and for some people, this may be you hold your marriage as an idol. For some people, it may be holding your children as an idol. For some people, it may be having children as an idol. But when we can get to the place that we can truthfully say, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away, blessed be the name of the Lord, and that our identity is in Jesus, that we're not consumed by anything else taking the place of Jesus sitting on the throne of our lives. When we can get to that place, like you said, with your wanting children, desiring children, for me, it was a fear of death. But when we get to that place of the Lord gives and the Lord takes away, blessed be the name of the Lord, that whatever happens, we will glorify the Lord. And that our identity isn't wrapped up in that our circumstances aren't wrapped up in that, but that regardless, if we're stripped of everything, blessed be the name of the Lord. So I think, again, you know, it's so timely with even you reading Job, of just being reminded of the story that you've walked through of the 7 years of recognizing that we have to lay everything down at the altar and at the foot of the cross, and truly allowing Jesus to be Lord of our lives, sitting on the throne, and that we get rid of the idols in our lives, because it's so easy. We think of idols as something man-made or maybe even something like TV or something, but oftentimes idols in our lives are people, their circumstances, their
ideas that occupy your mind, and your heart. And
so just recognizing maybe for those for those of us who are listening to you, just being reminded of that we need to take inventory and get rid of the idols that are in our lives. Yeah. Laurie, it also reminds me of, was it Samuel's mother who was barren for so many years, and Samuel, right? And went to the temple every day and begging God for a child. And when she had him, that she gave him back to the Lord.
Yeah.
What did that process look like for you of waiting 7 years, knowing that God had placed this desire in your heart? But also then you talked about being a better mom spiritually. Does it also make you, even as Samuel's mother gave him back to the Lord, when he honored her request and gave her a child, what does that look like for you on the other side of walking 7 years of waiting, of recognizing the weight and responsibility of these girls are truly a gift from the Lord? Yeah. All of our children are totally a gift from the Lord, yeah. But I'm sure you take that a lot more personal.
I do take it personal. First, I have to say, people in the church love to talk about all the barren women in the Bible when it comes to infertility. And it's like, oh, that's not that comforting, because when you like talk about Sarah, you're like, I ain't trying to be that old and have a baby, okay? Like, I'm not trying to wait a lifetime here, okay? So you can keep that verse for yourself, okay? Like, but no, like, definitely I have the motherhood perspective to say that I heard, okay, this is funny, but I heard this from Will Smith the other day, actually, because he did a fatherhood, like, TED Talk, you know, the Red Table Talk, whatever. But his description was to say that, like, you know, God plants the seed and all I'm doing is watering, right? Like, all I'm doing is maintaining this garden. I'm just maintaining these kids and right. Their giftings. I'm the manager of it. I'm going to hold it together. I'm going to care for it. I'm going to maintain it. But it's his, you know? Right. And I think that, you know, talking about motherhood, it takes so much weight off of yourself, you know? Like, it's a heavy job to say, oh, like, this is all banking on what I'm going to do. No, like, right. I don't need that. Like, I don't need that weight up in my life. Like, that's what God is for. Let him be the rock, you know? Like, that's what he says. Put your weight and your burden on him. Let him carry that. These are his kids. I'm here and you're sleeping in my house, but you belong to him, you know, like, right. And clearly it didn't take me and daddy making those kids. It took God making those kids, you know, like, they are his, they're his creation. Like, thank you that you used me to guide them. Like, thank you that I am, you know, a source for them, but they're not mine, they're his. And that's why they have to find their own relationships with him, because they don't belong to me, they belong to him, you know. I myself am a child of God. I am his, so they are his.
Right. Well, and that does lift a huge weight and burden off of us as mothers when we think that we, you know, we're sinful, and we know that we're sinful. We know that we're selfish. We know that we make mistakes. And so to think that everything's riding on us can be, you know, a trap that Satan can use of, you know, making us feel unworthy, because we already know that we mess up. You know, I already know my shortcomings. And so, yeah, just to be able to recognize that these children are a gift from God. He loves them more than we could possibly love them. And we already know we would lay down our lives for them, right? And so just all that love that, but letting him, we being wise stewards, right? We should not neglect, and we should definitely be intentional. And I know that you and I are very passionate about being intentional in our roles as mothers, but also recognizing that we can allow God to carry the weight of motherhood, because it is overwhelming, and especially when we mess up, you know, it can be very overwhelming, and it can be hard to not beat ourselves up. So I think constantly recognizing that they're his, we do have a responsibility, but God carries the weight and burden of motherhood for us. What does it look like and I love how you also prefaced your story with recognizing this is your story. I've had so many friends through the years who have struggled with infertility, and all of their stories are so different.
Yeah.
And every story is not only different, every decision that has to be made is very, very personal, and something between, you know, their spouse and God. But what would you offer as wisdom to us as an audience to recognize how we can support, how we can encourage, how we can be a good friend to those who are walking the road of infertility? Because I think you also bring up a very valuable point. It's easy to use scripture, right, as a way we think we're encouraging.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change a deep, deep desire. It doesn't change the hurt. It doesn't change the going to bed at night and crying yourself to sleep. It doesn't change being around other people who are excited and you feel bad if you can't celebrate, but honestly, maybe you are bitter and angry that they're pregnant and you're not. So how can we be a better friend when we have people in our lives who are walking the road of infertility?
Well, I think, again, everybody is different. I mean, I've known people who have gone through infertility who didn't have those feelings of jealousy and bitterness like I did, you know, like good for them. Like they didn't have to have those feelings. It wasn't that for them, you know, like, so not everybody has those feelings like I had, you know, but for me, like, I don't know, Mother's Day at church is kind of just the worst, you know, it's just the worst. And even as a mom now, I think, why do we need to celebrate moms? Like celebrate moms all year, you know, like, you know, and I don't need a flower from church to like be like, I'm a good mom, you know, like I don't really, even as a mom, I don't need that. So I don't know necessarily if churches need to be like celebrating moms in that way. Although I will say my mom is the mom of 7 kids and she loves that. Like she loves Mother's Day at church. Like she loves that day. I personally am like, I can take it or leave it, you know? But walking through infertility and going to church on Mother's Day, I'm pretty sure there's a Mother's Day I for sure did not go to church because I was like, I just don't even want to deal with it. I don't want people looking at me. Like, I just don't want to, you know? I would say like, don't feel guilty that you have a baby. Like, don't feel guilty. I mean, God's blessed you. And even through infertility, I can recognize the blessing when I see it. But I guess just being sensitive to friends who may be walking through that, or being able to just listen. You know, there's not a lot of people who want to hear your sob story. So just being willing to listen. And I think even just saying, I'm sorry it's hard. Like, I'm sorry that something that should have been easy isn't easy for you. You know, something that you thought was going to be natural isn't natural for you for whatever reason. I'm sorry that it's hard. You know, I think just that in any situations of just saying, I'm sorry it's hard. Like sometimes just that is so like validating and comforting just in itself, you know? Yeah. And then, you know, also me and my husband, like I said, we like threw ourselves into church. I like threw myself into helping in the nursery because I thought like maybe that would help me. It didn't, but I tried, you know, like I truly enjoy babies and always have, like even, you know, before having my own. I actually don't like babies that much anymore. Now that I'm over it. Like, oh, they're cute. Like, but I was like, oh, and I would always help in the nursery, like every Sunday, like, oh, let me just be around babies. Let me just be near them. Let me just be near moms. Let me put myself in those circles to try to, I don't know, make me suppress those like feelings that I was having of jealousy. You know, I thought that maybe that would work, but it didn't. It was a good idea, but it didn't work. You know, really it took him healing my heart to make those feelings go away. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if anything specific to anybody who's going through infertility right now, that's what I would say, is that I'm sorry. It's hard. I'm sorry that, you know, it hasn't happened for you yet. And I would say it may not happen, you know, truthfully. And I don't mean that to be like Debbie Downer, but it may not happen. And are you okay with that? Are you okay if it doesn't happen? You know, are you okay with an unanswered prayer or a delayed answered prayer? Like, and I would also say, don't let it handicap you. Like, you have to keep living. And this goes for anything that's going on in your life. Don't let it, you know, what's the word? I don't know, stifle you or make you stop living. Like, there's still so much life to live around you. Like, don't let it just stop you, you know? And then I have this verse, Psalm 34 says, delight yourself in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart. And it's really easy to pray for God to give you the desires of your heart, but you know, sometimes we forget about the delighting in him first. And so I would say to put your focus there and to put all of that weight and that burden on him, because he tells us to. And I mean, otherwise, what else are you going to do with it? You know, you'll just let it, you know, dissolve inside you. Otherwise, you know, like, just let him carry it, because he already knows everything you're feeling anyways. And I think that's also like, it can feel very lonely to go through something like that, but knowing that you're not alone, that he's with you, that, you know, he's already set the path before you and he knows the outcome. There's comfort in that, you know?
Right. Before I ask you the next question, I just want to say to our audience members, if you have any questions for Laurie during this time, feel free. There's a Q&A button down at the bottom, and we will try to save a little bit of time. If you want to type in a question, I'll try to get to that. But Laurie, as you're saying that, one of the things that strikes me is we all have trials and desert experiences that we walk through.
Yeah.
For so many people, it can be a marriage. It can be a teen who's not walking with the Lord. It could be, you know, in your case, infertility, financial struggles. Everybody has those desert experiences that we walk through. What would you say as you look back on those 7 years? I think one of the things that is common that can be challenging is, you know, on those nights when we're crying ourselves to sleep because it hurts so bad, what are some of the things that maybe you recognize were challenges of whether it's self-worth or identity or comparison, or things that get in the way when we, you know, you're wanting a child, you're surrounded by people who have children. What are some of those things that maybe you walked through that that now looking back, you can also see how those were pruning periods maybe in your life? Or does that make sense or relatable? I just know that as we walk through different challenges, it can really get in our heads if we're not really careful that, you know, we're renewing our minds daily and we're recognizing that our identity is in Christ and this doesn't define us, and our worth and our value isn't in being a mother. Our worth and value is being a daughter of the King. So what are some of those struggles that maybe women would be walking through that you personally really remember were hard, and how you had to also reconcile that your identity is in Christ and renewing your mind was important to not get in those deep, dark places? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and going back to Job, I mean, the book begins with him saying, well, what did I do? Like, where's my sin? Like, I thought I was righteous. Like, I thought I was doing everything. And it'd be really easy for me to say those same things. I worked in a church. I was consumed by doing ministry and pouring myself into youth and nursery and kids and everything else. Like, why am I being punished? It can feel like a punishment. It's like, no, it's not punishment. It's just life. It's just life, you know, like, this ain't heaven. This is life, you know, like, it's hard for everybody. Everybody has something hard, and it can be it's really easy to say, woe is me when there's something going on, but just taking that focus off yourself and putting it on someone else, it really deepens your compassion for other circumstances. You know, yeah, I'm going through infertility. Well, they don't have a job, you know, like, or I'm going through infertility, but, you know, my friend's husband is deployed and she hasn't seen him in a year, you know, like there's so much, everybody has something they're going through. Everybody, you know, has to put that faith in him and take it off of themselves. And I don't know what else to say, like just not.
Well, and I think that even just what you said just now is a great reminder in recognizing that everybody is going through something or will go through something, right? Yeah. None of us are immune to trials and tribulations in our lives. And recognizing to just show more compassion to people. I think so often, and I'm so guilty of this, but, you know, everybody's consumed with themselves and their own lives and their own situations that it's hard to remember to show that compassion, to show that kindness of how are you doing, and to be more sensitive to the people around us, recognizing that whether it's a husband that's deployed or someone walking through infertility or someone whose marriage is falling apart. But just to be more sensitive and in tune with the people around us, recognizing that we have the opportunity to be the hands and feet of Jesus in how we interact with other people, and just being kind and compassionate.
And motherhood itself is like, it strips you of it strips you so much of all. You don't even know how selfish you are until you become a mom. You're like, oh, I used to spend how much time getting ready? Or I used to get so many hours of sleep and that's gone, you know, like you realize, oh, wow, I was really into myself, you know, before. Right.
We have a question from the audience. One of the questions that came in is, what advice would you give a person who is type A and is walking through a season of waiting? Now, Laurie, I know you and I cannot relate to being type A at all. I think we're both type A. But in all seriousness, I mean, I think that's a great question. What advice would you give someone who's type A, who likes all the ducks in the row, who likes to be in control and know the plan, you know, and you're in a season of waiting?
Well, I mean, gosh, control, like, you think you can control your own body and make a baby? Nope. Nope. Like, yeah, like you can have your plan of like what your marriage is going to look like, but it looks completely different, or my life looks completely different. And I think, and also even just mothering makes you just like strip all that away of like, oh, I like things like this, but no, like, I'm a type A parent now. So type A parent looks a lot different than just like a regular type A person, because it's not going to go your way. You have to like be flexible and let things change. And I mean, are we going to say we're going to control God? Like, you know, he's in control, and let him control. He's going to have his way, whether we like it or not. So you may as well just let the reins go and let him have it. A season of waiting is, I have this book that somebody gave me, and it's called Anonymous, and it's by Alicia Britt Choli. And somebody gave it to me when I was going through infertility, and I have read it so many times because it is so applicable to everything. But it talks about the anonymous years of Jesus. Like, we only know pretty much just like this much of Jesus's life. We know his birth. We know he was a child in the temple. We know, you know, what happened in the Gospels of his life, right? But all the years in between are blank. We don't know what he was doing, and maybe he was waiting for the cross. You know, like Jesus. Can you imagine like Jesus waiting, like knowing what's going to happen and waiting? And so it can feel really lonely during waiting, and it can feel really anonymous. You feel like unseen, you know, like God doesn't even, he's not even, hello, I'm praying every day. You don't see me, like I'm anonymous, but no, like, it's not all going to be seen, you know, like not every moment is a victory, you know, like it took Jesus 33 years before he came to what his purpose was in this life, you know? So I think there's a lot of growth in waiting. I mean, it matures your faith, it matures your spirituality. For me, it matured my marriage. It prepared me for parenting more than I could have before. So yeah, waiting is hard, but I don't know what else to say except you just got to keep doing it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think something you just said, wow, hit me like a ton of bricks when you said, and you think, you know, you can make a baby. Like you think that you have that power. And recognizing like that ultimately, you know, everything comes from God. Being able to be pregnant is a gift from God, right? And so just for us to recognize that we don't have the power and control that we think we have and that we're grasping for. And again, like going back to Job, I think recognizing that we have to have open hands as well as an open heart to be able to say like, it's yours, God, and to be able to relinquish that control that we so desperately try to hold on to.
And that is something greater than even you.
Right.
I mean, I would have never imagined that I would have 3 girls. Like, firstly, I thought I was going to have boys if I had kids, but I didn't. But like, that's more than I imagined, you know? And then when I had one, I thought maybe this is it and I'm grateful. But then I got 2 more and I know a lot of other moms that deal with secondary infertility where they have 1 kid easy and then they can't have any subsequent kids because whatever reason, I don't know. But yeah, just saying like, it could be something better than you could imagine for your own life, you know?
Right. What would you say, we're almost out of time, but as we begin to wrap up, you've mentioned your marriage a couple times and how this had a profound impact on your marriage. And I think that anytime we walk through trials, whether it's infertility or anything in our lives, that our marriages can be challenged because we're maybe not always on the same page. And so you referenced about how you wanted to go ahead and have kind of figuring out the next thing. What's the next thing, to be proactive in doing something, while your husband was wanting to have a season of waiting and trusting God. What would you, because I think this applies to every single person that's married, regardless of if they've ever or are dealing with infertility, what would you say is something that we should be intentional in trusting God and trusting our husbands as we walk through trials? What does that look like?
Yeah, for me, I don't know if I can explain it except that it was just a change in my heart that allowed me to do that. Because I definitely was like, oh, what do we need to do? What's the next step in the process of like getting a baby? Or maybe we should explore adoption, or you know, there's so many options, maybe we should do that. But it was really hard for me to be like, no, we should just wait. Well, how long am I supposed to wait? Am I supposed to just like put my whole life on hold waiting? That seems like such a waste when we could just have the answer. But again, like I couldn't control what was going to happen, you know, like, and then getting to the place of saying, okay, we're in agreement. That was a long time. And it took, you know, for someone who wants to talk about all of their feelings to someone who doesn't. He did not want to talk about this all the time. And I probably annoyed him to tears of like, you know, let's talk about having a baby again for the umpteenth time, you know, like, chill, lady, it's coming. Like, you know, I don't know. It just took a change in my heart. It took a shift in my heart, and it took, and I tell this to him, and he says, no, that's not true. But I always say, I don't know if he had ever directly said to me, I think we should just wait. I don't know if he ever said those words, or maybe he did, and I just didn't hear them in that way. I don't know. But like, after God healed that hurt in my heart, then it was like, I just remember this conversation of saying, well, what should we do? And he said, we should just wait. Wow. And I just heard it so much more vivid that time. I don't know. I'm like, had you ever said that before actually? Or did I just hear it for the first time? And maybe that was God speaking through him to me. I don't know, but like and that was like 6 years at that point. But I'm like, really? Like, why am I just hearing you say that? Like, so, and maybe it was God using him to say that to me, because when he said that, I just felt like a comfort and a peace of like, oh, okay, like I can do that. Like, I don't know why it was different that time, but it was. And so trusting, so maybe it's more of like a direct conversation with your spouse, a real like, this is where I am. I don't know what's going to happen. What do you think? And then for him to say that, I don't know, it was just so vivid to me. I don't know how else to explain it, except like I heard it so clear that time, and I hadn't heard him say that before, and that just brought comfort to me. And that was when I was able to just let it go, you know?
Well, and I think that's a great reminder that, you know, to not let our marriage suffer just because we're walking through suffering.
Yeah.
You know, to protect our marriage and to realize that you are a team, you are one. And while you may see life at two different perspectives, to not let your marriage get trampled just because you're walking through.
And I will also say, it was not my husband's dream to be a father. Like, for maybe not all moms, but like for me as a girl, was like, I can't wait to be a mom. And you play mom, and you play dress up, and like you pretend you're the mom. And when I asked him, I'm like, well, did you ever think about being a dad? Did you ever think you'd be a dad for your girls? He's like, I didn't think about that. And I'm like, oh, that's why it was so hard, because I had been waiting for this, and you were like, whatever, you know, like he had no expectation of what parenting was going to look like or when it was going to happen. So, and that's an obvious reason why there was strife between us, because he didn't have those ideals like I did.
And expectations, yeah. And I think, and just recognizing that anytime we have expectations, we have deep desires, we have dreams, then when those expectations and dreams aren't being met and fulfilled, then, like you said at the beginning, it reveals our heart. Are we letting things be idols instead of having God on the throne and looking for these dreams to be fulfilled by him in his timing, and also having open hands that whatever his timing looks like, and on the side of heaven, they may not all be fulfilled. But I think that recognizing that when our heart is being hurt because we have unmet needs and desires, then it's an open wound, and to recognize that it's open wound and therefore it's going to hurt because it's exposed. But to also, I really like how you pointed out that taking inventory of the dreams and desires we have, of what is an idol, what do we need to lay down, how can we walk with open hands, and also not destroying everything and everybody along our path either, because I think that hurt people.
Yeah.
And so it's easy for hurt people to be very destructive in the process of pain. And so being able to be intentional to walk through pain with grace and dignity and with humility. But Laurie, I know that our time is out. We're out of time, but you have been such a resource of hope and encouragement. I love being able to talk through your story, because I think, you know, honestly, we're talking about infertility, but it leads to so many other very important points in all of our lives of recognizing how we can be more like Jesus in the highs and in the lows. And so I just really appreciate your time. Thank you for spending your afternoon with us and being a source of wisdom and encouragement. So thank you so much.
I'm happy to share, and I hate to say, I'm happy I waited 7 years so that I can have this conversation with you.
Do you have any closing remarks that you would like to just share with our audience as we go out? Anything that you just want to wrap up in a closing comment?
All I can say is, when I had our firstborn and had labored all day and then was laying in the bed, and they brought in the table that they were going to lay the baby in when she was born, I just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed and just cried and couldn't believe, like, and I will say my husband was crying too, but I'm pretty sure he was crying too. I couldn't see him through my own tears, but we just cried so much. And I just remember like being handed my baby and just holding her and just crying, thinking, I could not believe that it happened. You know, I couldn't believe what me like this, like I can't even put into words, like just when they were rolling in that bed, I just had that vivid memory of like, oh my gosh, like this is real. It's happening. Like God does answer prayer, and it is in his own timing, and it doesn't look like what you think it's going to look like, but it could be better.
Right.
And holding on to that truth is, I mean, that's the only thing you can do. I mean, so I guess I would end it there to say, it's amazing. And this is my happily ever after, you know, like not every day is perfect, but it's, we walk in his will, you know, like we live a submitted life, and that's happily ever after for me.
Right. That's so good. So powerful. Thank you, Laurie. Thank you for sharing your story. And thank you for your just vulnerability and humility and honesty to be able to share so that we can learn and grow and be better for it. So I appreciate you. Thank you to our audience members for joining us. We'll be back next Tuesday, every Tuesday, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you again, Laurie. Thank you, audience. Have a blessed day.
Thank you.